Welcome to the Fresh and Fired Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Marshall, here to help you function at your best in health, fitness, and life. Here with the wonderful Hailee Piendl, who decided to join us multiple episodes in a row. Actually, a lot of episodes. You should go back and listen to them. They're really great. And we are here today, so let's get fired up.
Shameless plug. Let's get fired up.
Yeah, shameless plug for there is a large percentage of you that view our content that are not yet subscribed. And it's a really free, easy way. Just click the subscribe button on YouTube. Give us a like or a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you like to listen. We truly appreciate it. And it's going to help us get the show out to more people, specifically women who might be struggling with diet culture or their training or anything that is affecting their health and fitness. And we like to weave in little bits of real life. Right, Hailee?
Absolutely. Little real life stories so you guys can stay in the know.
Yeah. Real life, not Fantasyland, right?
Not Fantasyland, not Hobbit World, not Star Trek.
We're not even going down that road today.
No, we won't. You can read that, okay?
Yeah, we're going to
say
about
your fantasy stuff.
We're going to stay super focused for you guys. Is that even possible? That's my question for you.
Is that even entertaining is the question, I think.
Yeah, it's not.
Not.
We are entertaining.
Exactly. That's why we spiral into different directions.
Exactly. And if you're not,
you and John just got your vows renewed.
Got remarried.
What about that? Got remarried.
Isn't it funny to say it that way? Yes, we renewed our vows. Let me actually be able to speak for our 15th year wedding anniversary. How come words aren't coming to me, Hailee? I need your help.
I'm not sure. What did you put in your coffee today?
I'm not done this cup of coffee. I'm going to drink the coffee and you talk for a bit and then we'll reset.
Okay. Well, I've got some really scandalous stuff going along with my wedding, but I don't know if I should speak to it just because it's not. I'm not the only one involved. Someone did the same date so on Justin's side of the family, someone did the exact same date. And it's causing so much blow up. There's a lot of blow up going on. We did it first. We booked the date first, and then they did it on the exact same day. So.
Oh no! So what are you gonna do?
I don't know. Well, it's not me because it's their family, and so it's more so my Justin's parents. His mom that's kind of rightfully so getting mad. I would be so mad too because now you can't go to this person's wedding and they can't come to ours where it's supposed to be a bunch of all of the people you love around you, so it's
right.
Anyways,
okay, well, keep us posted on that drama if I'm allowed to call it drama.
It is pretty dramatic. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm so glad you're keeping us in the loop. I love it. Well, ours was much less dramatic. It was just a simple thing. It's something we had been thinking about, and we did it at the church on Friday. We renewed our vows, and it was so fun. Our kids walked up with us, and we were all at the front, and we did the vow renewal, and then we had some yummy refreshments after. It was lovely.
Oh, we love that.
So I feel like it's one of those things, though. I was thinking about this, even when you do events like that, let's just talk. Okay, we're already talking weddings. Even when you're doing an event like a wedding, if you are trying to do it, be on a certain diet, count calories, track your macros, there's lots of different things you could be doing for your health. And then all of a sudden you're on vacation or you attend an event and it can be paralyzing. It can be scary. It can be paralyzing, or it could just be a free for all binge. I feel like events can be really hard for people if they're having food struggles, whether it be previous eating disorder or they're just trying to get back, get their bodies healthy again because they've gone too off the rails with years of binging. I don't know. I'm just thinking of this because I'm think about when you come to a wedding or a potluck or something and you're there's so many different types of foods. Do you have any thoughts on that? That wasn't even a question. I was just thinking about how this can be hard for people.
Yeah, no, I was just reliving some very traumatic experiences of mine while you were saying that. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it's we say this all the time. It's the all or nothing. So when people have poor relationships with food, I like to use the analogy of you look at your feet for too long and you're like, where is this beauty mark? Where did it come from? And it becomes to look a little bit distorted. Same thing if you have too much of a focus on food and you go to an event and the only thing you're thinking about is the food, your mindset towards it becomes distorted. Like there's so many other aspects of that event, like I don't know, the people there, making memories, celebration that you can be focusing on. But when you do have this unhealthy relationship with food, typically very, very heavy emphasis on the food that's available of avoidance. And you're trying to avoid it like the plague. But in that avoidance, you have like maybe you have a slice of cake, but then that inflicts like, oh, I screwed up. This is over with. My day is absolutely ruined. So you either like continuously go overboard at the event and or you go home and you're like, screw it, I'm just going to eat everything in the pantry. So it's kind of like one of two things. People, a lot of like secret eating in terms of binges, like people don't want to like show that they're struggling with food. So typically what I'll see and what I did as well was like you have one thing at the party because, you know, there's cake, there's chips, there's all these things that you typically want to avoid because like, you know, it's just a gathering and that's just gathering food.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go home because you feel like a failure and then you just like eat your fridge and binge. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah. And then after, what are the feelings that come after that?
Guilt. And honestly, that's what kind of causes that spiral. Like, if you don't feel the guilt and you can just move on, it's so much better, right? It's not a point of messing up because along this journey, I think people expect to have this one aha moment or this one magic pill and everything's going to be great and dandy. And I'm just not going to ever binge or overeat again. Where it's like, you allow enough time to pass and you just get better at bouncing back. I think it's that bounce back rate that should be a little bit more paid attention to rather than like wallowing in the guilt and allowing it to fester and like manifest, right? So the guilt you don't want to feel, but you will feel because you know you have these past experiences, these past beliefs, and it's just kind of how your brain is wired at the moment. But little by little you can change it, and like you mentioned before in our client call, reframing and just creating that new belief system so you can bounce back better. And so the length between these overeating patterns becomes longer and longer until they become non-existent.
Oh, yes, bounce back. That's a really good way to put it. It makes me okay, this I was thinking about this morning but applied to a different scenario, but I feel you can apply it to this as well. I had a mentor one time say to me, when you're thinking about short-term and long-term struggles or challenges, people will often just want to get through their bad day, right? So let's just say you ate something, you ate a bunch of stuff that you didn't feel good about, and then you felt guilt or shame, and then you felt like this has just ruined your day or the week is ruined. You know what I mean? You can kind of grandize to that. Well, he was saying a bad morning doesn't make a bad day. A bad day doesn't make a bad week. A bad week doesn't make a bad month. A bad month doesn't make a bad year. You could keep going with it, right? Your mind is going to want to do this thing where it snowballs the time frame longer than this one moment. So I love what you said about that. When you're bouncing back quicker, you're not allowing to go down that train of thought with time frames in your mind. And it works in reverse too. Just because you had a good morning doesn't mean it's going to be like a fully good day or the whole week's going to be good. A good week doesn't make a good month. A good month doesn't make a good year. It's looking at it in cycles, and there's always going to be the ups and downs. They're always going to be there. And it's more about how you react and respond to them, because you're not ever going to be able to fully eliminate them, which is the same as you're not going to want to fully eliminate gatherings with all these different types of food. You don't want to eliminate every type of food in your, food is not fully the enemy. And I think when you can go into like a full blown anorexia, all of a sudden it's like all food is bad. Food is the enemy. And I just need to stop eating altogether and this problem will go away. Well, no, that's not how it works. So it made me think of that when you were saying that. It's like, okay, there's going to be this cycle and the rhythm to it, but it can be really hard to not grandize and not like catastrophize. I think that's huge. Do you have any thoughts on so the bounce back rate, but then do you have any thoughts on even just the mindset work, like more to the mindset work of being able to bounce back quicker?
I think it's got a lot to do with like your internal dialogue and self-judgment. I think the whole root of it is the judgment. And if you heavily judge what you did, or like you said, like catastrophize and hold so much worth, and I think it also has to do with like where you do hold your worth and where you do hold your value. I like to use again the analogy of like the pie chart. So typically with people who have disordered eating patterns or don't have food freedom, their pie chart is very heavily like their self-worth is numbers, calories, how much they eat, how much they exercise, and what body weight they're at. And so when like that's threatened or they fail in some way with how they're valued by themselves, that all can be taken away. And then you're kind of spiraling because you have no other buckets to pull from.
Mm.
Whereas when you do have food freedom and you do have a good sense of self worth, your pie chart looks a lot more diverse. So there's your relationships, there's your career, there's, I don't know, adventures, there's other things that you do value yourself with. So even if you do mess up, because we're all human beings and there's no reality where you don't overeat, it's a human thing that you do. So that won't threaten your self worth as heavily as someone who holds all of their self worth in just what they eat, how much they exercise, and what their body looks like, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It also makes me think of the value of being utilitarian. Like when you put so much value. So I was raised in a household, like I was raised in a great household. I'm super thankful for the way that I was raised. And I get the sense that you have had this in your upbringing as well, Hailee, where, there can be a lot of emphasis on what we do, where it's good in the sense of it gives you this work ethic and this discipline and consistency. You learn all these things like I'm a hard worker, right? But what can happen is if we're always emphasizing, even if it comes down to like I'm going to eat certain foods for my health, well, why do I want to be healthy? For some people it's the aesthetic and the look, but for me it's often functionality and utilitarian. If I'm not operating at my highest potential, I'm not getting enough done in a day. And if I'm not being productive, if I'm not turning the dial, whether that be productivity, financially, some level of success or giving back to the community, I'm like, I'm failing essentially, right? And so those things aren't bad in and of themselves. It's good to give back to your community. It's good to run a good business. It's good. Those are all good things. But if they're the only thing, then what happens when you're injured and you can't work out, now you can't do your job properly? All of a sudden you're not doing, right? I'm not doing anything. Therefore, I'm not contributing, and so therefore I'm worthless, kind of, right? Like you could, that sounds extreme, but we do that to ourselves on a micro scale in our minds frequently if we're not able to do all the time. And I think it's really good to take a step back and go, okay, I don't need to put all of my eggs in this one utilitarian bucket, because I have value and worth outside of what I can do as well, right? And that would be like the same way beauty, if we think about something that's just beautiful. When I was given at our renewal of vows, I was given cut flowers, and they're these beautiful yellow flowers and they've got other colors mixed in, and I have them set just above our piano for the week, and they just look beautiful. They don't do anything, but they do bring a level of joy into our kitchen just because they're beautiful. Like I'm just using that as a different example where it's like, yeah, you're more than what you eat, you're more than what you do. You have inherent value as a human being either way. And that's why we're not, if you're in a car accident and you get paralyzed from the neck down, you're not now worthless. But I think even in that case, when people have had a bad accident, that can be very hard on their mind because they're like, wait, if I can't do my workouts and now I can't do my job and everything has to shift and change. Like, what do we do with that?
Yeah, yeah. I think like that would be really hard. I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, imagine being paralyzed from the neck down. Like that'd be hard in and of itself, of course. And I think it's like Um, Easier said than done. However, like change is hard whether it's good or bad. Like we were talking about this before. We like to be comfortable, any kind of comfort. And even if we know that comfort is not good for us, like you mentioned how we were brought up, like that's comfortable.
Yes.
However, that's not always like the best route. And sometimes you do have to get outside of that comfort zone in order to get to a more comfortable, maintainable, happier place. And that's what I see like a lot of with this food freedom too. People don't, they know what to do. Like there's this whole contrast of knowing what to do and actually doing the darn thing. Where they're comfortable where they're at, they're comfortable restricting, they're comfortable being in the binge restrict cycle. Oh my gosh, sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Malfunctions. They're comfortable being in the binge and restrict cycle, and even though like they're working towards food freedom, it still feels uncomfortable and icky and like ugh. So like again, just like having some patience and having that zoomed out view rather than being so narrow focused on like, oh my gosh, this one time I ate a cookie and I feel so bad about it. Like have so much more of a zoomed out view of it. Like, okay, we ate a cookie. That's not the end of the world. It's literally just a piece of food. Like the world isn't at war. We're all good. We're all safe. You can choose again the next meal. Like it doesn't have to roll into the rest of your week and years. So,
Yeah, no, that's good. And I feel like it's interesting because I've definitely battled with this where we know which foods are more nutrient dense, right? And we know which foods are healthier. And so I find sometimes when the easier thing for me to do, which would be what you're saying, like as a comfort zone, is to create these black and white lines that are like, no, I only eat red meat and I only eat fruit and certain vegetables and I only eat, like honey and no other type of sugar. Like I will like pick my foods and be like, I know these are health foods. I know they have health content. So this is all I'm going to do. Right. And it's like in my mind, it's all in the name of these are the healthy foods. These are the nutrient dense foods. These give me the most energy, which there is truth to that. And there have times where I've been like, I've eaten really clean, but I've been having enough calories that I do find my energy feels good, right? That being said, there are times when I've gone the other direction. And I would say this summer, I've been more so like this. Like in the past, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to just have like ice cream with my kids every once in a while, or I'm going to have, whatever. I start adding in foods that clearly aren't the healthiest of foods, right? But they're fun. It's the experience. Like you said, it's like me taking my kids out to an ice cream parlor and we're all having our ice cream together, right? So that being said, it can be hard to not be like, wow, that ice cream was really good. Let's go get ice cream every day. Like we know that that's not good either, right? So how do you create this world for yourself that's like, I do want to eat foods that are going to help my body function well, but I also am able to some of the time have the cookie without now just wanting to eat cookies for breakfast, lunch, and supper. You know
that's
what I'm
such an
saying?
interesting question, and so many things pop up in my mind because there's been so many different phases for myself where like one or the other was actually the better choice. So, when I was like deep in and like just starting to get over like binge eating and emotional eating and all of this, because like, yes, I did restrict. However, then it became a habitual pattern where it's like I walked in the door, I'm in this environment, and that kind of triggered my urges to binge. So in that season of life, I didn't keep anything that I would binge on in the house. I was like completely cold turkey, get the heck out of my house because I don't know moderation. And like at that point, that was the best choice for me because like you just take it out of the equation. Like don't even think about moderation because like I had no sense of the word up until the point where like you build some self-trust in yourself. Like some time has passed. I had like been binge free for a few months, and then I started incorporating those foods. I called them my binge foods, or like you could call them fear foods, whatever like resonates best with you. I started bringing them into my house, and I started to incorporating them day to day. So that kind of lowered the stress that it would inflict on myself, because like, oh, trauma, Oreos are in my house now. I used to binge literally on every single row of them. How am I going to deal with this now? So I incorporated them every day, one portion per day, until you can prove to yourself like, this is actually, I was being a little bit ridiculous, and this is actually not as scary as I thought. This is totally fine. Like, I can incorporate this into my daily nutrition and nothing bad is going to happen. So it's a lot of like self-trust building, until you get to a point where you're so in tune. I like to call it body literacy, of like, what is an actual craving and what is like an emotional eating pattern that is just getting triggered by the situation. So I
Mhm.
think it's just like you learn through so many years of doing it, the body literacy and like how your own brain kind of works and how your own patterns work, to differentiate like, is the best way for me to get over this kind of hard time with food? Is it to completely eliminate it, or is it to practice moderation? And it was the same with exercise for me, as me too. Like, there was a time where like rest, forcing myself to rest was the better option. And sometimes, like at the start of my journey, forcing myself to work out was the better option. So I think being very in tune with like what your goals are, and not just like taking information in at face value and just applying it blanket statement on top of like what your situation is, because it is very situational. And there are better choices depending on what situation you're in and where your mindset is, right? So if you are a binge eater and you do it every day on the same foods, maybe you need to take those foods out, so you're not trying to have this mental gymnastics of like, do I eat it? Do I not eat it? And then by the time you're done, like with the conflict going on inside of your head, you're freaking exhausted and you end up doing it anyways. So just get that out of the equation, so that you can actually focus, like, is this like a biological kind of response to me restricting, and that's why I'm super hungry and that's why I'm having urges to binge? Or is it this emotional part of it, where maybe I had a binge earlier in the year with the same situation? I was stressed. It was the same sort of stressor at work. And now those are the thoughts that are coming up because that was a learned pattern that I'm now having again. Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. What if you are having issues with your mornings? So let's say morning or earlier part of your day where you're like, let's say, I think it happens because of stress. Stress response is I have no appetite. I'm not like able to eat, or I really have trouble getting myself. I'm not saying this for myself. I'm using actually an example from someone else. I don't have an issue with this. I like my breakfast. But I have heard this from many women where it's like, okay, I have no appetite. I don't want to eat my breakfast. I don't feel like even eating lunch, or I'll have a tiny lunch. And they get through their day and they get to the end of the day and now they're like, oh, I'm starving and I'm going to like eat a bunch of snacks in the evening. That to me is a form of disordered eating, or I don't know if the right word is disordered, like their timing of their day is not good. But at the same time, if you're like, okay, come on, you gotta eat some breakfast, it's just like, I have no appetite. It's like, okay, well, how can we help move this in the right direction? Because
Yeah.
tell us a little bit of that pattern of eating.
That's where it's like, um, do you listen more towards like the actual facts, or do you listen to your body? So sometimes when your body is dysregulated, you can't trust it. And it's the same thing we've talked about intuitive eating. Like, if you don't know it, then you can't do it intuitively, right?
Yeah,
So
you've said before, and I've heard this resonate with many people. You have to earn the right to intuitive eating.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And then, so for the breakfast point, so the way your cortisol is supposed to work is it peaks in the morning, which wakes you up, and then it slowly decreases throughout the day, and it's lowest at the evening. So what happens, cortisol does kind of suppress your appetite. So that's a part of the reason why people aren't super hungry in the morning. However, if you don't eat and you fast until like midday, your cortisol spikes even more, and that stress response is even bigger. And then it kind of throws off your blood sugar, it throws off your cortisol levels. And then by the end of the evening, when like all is said and done, the kids are in bed, you have time to relax, and your like stress level is really low, you're like, frick, I am hungry, because you haven't eaten all day. However, people think that since they eat a lot at night, they shouldn't eat or in the early in the day, which is the complete opposite. You eat a lot at night because you don't eat earlier in the day. So rather than backloading your calories, front load them. So that way your cortisol levels can be just regulated, your blood sugars can be regulated, your hunger hormones can be regulated. And by the end of the night, you're not like scanning the cupboards for everything in there and you're not like thinking about food constantly. So like the solution is like the reason people avoid it, ironically. But yeah, night eating is very biologically like you should eat earlier in the day. And then of course, like if someone has been doing this for a very extended like a long time, there is going to be that habitual pattern that is kind of in place as well, where it's like now you eat a lot at the end of the day, where in that case start eating earlier in the day. So biologically, you're not starving. And then you can focus on that mental aspect and you can focus on like the thought patterns and reframing them rather than having two of those battles at once, where you're trying to battle your mind and you're also trying to battle your biology.
Yeah. There's also the trap of when you eat a bunch at the end of the day, it's going to affect your sleep patterns. You're not going to get into that deep wave sleep and then have your proper REM cycles. So you're also going to wake up feeling exhausted. And this then increases the same destructive habit because you're like, okay, now I'm exhausted. Now I don't want to get up and get going on whatever you need to do that day, whether you're working out or you need to get yourself to your place of work, right? You start your day feeling bagged and then you go through and then you almost feel like you're playing catch up, which increases your cortisol levels, which suppresses your appetite more, and the cycle continues. So what are ways that we can interrupt this cycle or like hack the cycle? I don't know, hack is the right word. Like at some point, if you always wake up feeling exhausted and stressed, you are going to want to go back to your same habit loop. What is your
Yeah.
recommendation of getting yourself into this habit of
You have to
less
pattern interrupt. So it's going to be uncomfortable at the start. Like it was really uncomfortable for me too, because it's new and there is going to be some turbulence. So there was many times where I would like, okay, Hailee, I'm going to eat in the morning because I know it's good for me and I know I have to start somewhere. And then I would overeat at night anyways because of the habitual pattern.
right?
And there was some turbulence, and there's going to be some turbulence typically as you figure it out. But if you don't take that step and you just continue in this cycle, like nothing is ever going to change. So sometimes it's just like make a decision. Like this is hi ladies, if you are in this cycle right now and listening to this podcast, this is your sign to start to eat breakfast. Okay, so you know this information now. Now you have to apply. Okay. And sometimes it's just about making that decision of like, okay, I'm tired of my BS. And now I'm just going to start this journey and figure it out along the way. Like you can get all this information, you can research the heck out of it, but there is a point of like experience and you learn a lot with experience just yourself. So you have to make a decision to stop being in this pattern and create a new one. So that is my advice.
And the decision, I love that because the decision is the kickstart to the recovery practice or the
Yeah.
recovery process is what I meant to say. If you are coming out of disordered eating, there is a recovery process. So just the same way, I know this is going to be an extreme example, but if you're an addict, there first has to be the decision. Like once you're an adult, you are not you like I think there's rules, right, where you can't necessarily sign someone in to a rehab center, right? They at some point you have to get them to the point where they will actually go. Like they've made that initial decision to be like I want to do the rehab. I want to do the recovery, right? So you just spoke to the decision. Now let's look at what are some of the other components of disordered eating recovery? What are some of the other components of that process? And how can people get through it?
Like what do you mean?
So we've touched on like some food freedom and intuitive eating, kind of, all sprinkled in here. But when we're doing, like you've come out of an eating disorder, it's a recovery process, right? We're prepping our brains for, I've decided, right? I've made the decision. Now I need to make an application. you just spoke to like, it's going to be a journey. What are some expectations, or, give maybe a bit more of your story? And like, what does that recovery process look like? What is the expectation? Because it's like some people are like, all right, you know what? I'm going to make this decision to get better, and my expectation is going to take a month, and we're going to be good to go. Like, that's not realistic, right?
Yeah.
So what is a realistic picture of eating disordered eating recovery?
Yeah. So the first step is always going to be like eating enough. I feel like a lot of our problems get resolved when we eat enough food. If your period is missing, if your digestion is shitty, sorry, pardon my French, if your mental cognition is brutal, your sleep is not great, your hair is falling out, a lot of your problems are going to be solved when you start to eat enough food. And that might be a little bit more food than what you're used to, because one thing that I find with like people coming in from disordered eating paths and behaviors and patterns is they really lack self-trust. Like there is zero self-trust, to the point like where a lot of my clients right at the start, and this does improve as we progress, they ask me so many questions and kind of like, oh, what about this? But like blood sugar regulation, but will I get diabetes? Blah, 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 blah. So there's so much of this like distrust with ourselves where it's like, okay, we need to kind of make that process of like, okay, maybe we can add a little bit of intuitiveness so you can start to practice like, how does this even feel in my body? Because they're so numb and they literally just focus on the calories. They just focus on the number because like this XYZ is going to get me here. And so there's no zero trust in my own body and I don't really know how to listen to it. So that would be step one, is just increasing your food, increasing your macros, adding a little bit of self-trust practice so you can get better at it. And also like nutrient timing is a huge thing that I see. And again, working with your physiology can help you feel good. And one thing that I find is when you start to feel good, your choices reflect that. So people are so much more inclined to like handle the stressor of recovery and handle being uncomfortable when you have energy, when you can sleep, when you're not constantly like thinking about food and your internal dialogue is really crappy. So what happens is like you start to have more energy and the recovery process becomes easier and easier, kind of like I mentioned with like the binge eating where it was really brutal. You have to remove all of these foods and then you can slowly add it back in, and like the resistance starts to become lower and lower because you're building the self-trust and you're actually working with your body rather than against it, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah,
Okay.
that's huge. I was just looking something up as you were talking because I think it ties in really well with what you're saying, because we've sprinkled in lots of these topics in other episodes as well, like the recovery that you just went through, thinking about diet culture detox, emotional eating, and how can we help ourselves, because a lot of this habitual patterning can also be tied in with what's your emotional state. And you see this all over like health and fitness. It's like, oh, emotional eating, I'm an emotional eater, right? And it's like, this has to do with your emotional intelligence. I like to talk a lot about emotional fitness, and it just made me think of like, okay, let's just go over what those are and how this ties in, because I think awareness is a really big step in getting help with your habitual emotional eating patterns. And that is also part of the recovery process. So, emotional intelligence, it is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage the influence of emotions both in yourself and others. And so it's really important because it's one of those things, you think about IQ, right? People will take like an IQ test. What's my level of intelligence? Well, that's important in one aspect, but then how your emotions, like your EQ, ties into that really affects the success you have in your relationships, your work, your leadership, your well-being. So this can be applied to health and fitness, but it can also be, like you said, when we're zooming out, we're looking at the whole pie and all the different aspects. This This is you being able to have a certain level of self-awareness, self-regulation that affects your motivation and your discipline. It affects your empathy and compassion and your social skills, right? So it ties in so much then to your relationships. I'm really big on that, as you know, like your food relationship, whatever it is, your relationships, they're often similar. If you have disordered relationship with food, you probably have disordered relationships with people too. Like a lot of it is about your emotional intelligence and your relationship with anything or anyone. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
That's just kind of a side note.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that plays into to like self-mastery. Until you like kind of master yourself, you can't really master anything else.
Yes. You
So
have to
like
lead yourself first before you can lead others.
absolutely, absolutely. And I see that a lot of like people in my DMs, more specifically, of like, oh, I'm trying to look a certain way for a guy. And like, it's very rooted in insecurity. And so, like, that reflects on their relationships and how they kind of get treated. Because if you treat yourself to some standard, which is a standard that's kind of lower, then you will accept that from other people. So
Yeah.
like, until you master yourself, I think this is so funny too, because like I was this person too where I'm like, yeah, I'm such a high value woman and like I want a good relationship, and like I couldn't even master myself.
Right. And I
Like,
think that, no, well, this is an interesting topic because this is a lifelong process. And I
yeah.
think if we fall into this trap of feeling like it's not, like you're really never going to be arrived, right?
Hmm.
You're always, but it's the commitment to journey and growth and learning and getting off track and bouncing back, like you already brought up. This is how you're going to more effectively manage your stress and your emotions, which then is going to reduce burnout and improve your mental and physical well-being. Then that ties into fostering connection and trust and healthy communication, etc. Right? Okay, I just looked up this fun fact. So fun fact that emotional intelligence accounts for about 90% of what sets top performers apart in leadership roles, which
I
I
think
think
that's
that
so
just
true.
speaks, yeah, I just think that speaks to the self-mastery and how when you actually, I think step one is always awareness, being aware of that you're even able to work on self mastery, and then how that can have a trickle down effect in all these other areas of your life. So
Yeah.
this is why I often in my immediate in my social media focus on emotional fitness, because I'm passionate about it, and because it, the ability to process, regulate, and channel your emotions in healthy ways, that's going to help so much with like thriving under stress, recovering from setbacks, creating meaningful relationships. And this all ties back into this particular topic of food freedom. I mean, and other topics, but if we're coming back to just what we've been focusing on for this episode, because if you're, there's the physical fitness aspect, right? Which is like, can you keep doing your workouts while your food where your sorry, what am I trying to say? If your eating patterns are disordered, are your workout patterns also going to be disordered? And if you feel like, there's these keystone habits, often when people are committed to their workouts, they'll often be more regulated in how they're eating. Sorry, in a good way, like in a healthy, regulated way, like food freedom, but then also making sure that they're, eating their breakfast, that sort of thing, right? Like they
Yeah.
often go hand in hand. And then your emotional fitness is right there too, where it's like your habits, your awareness, your perspective, having that zoomed out view, all of these things often go hand in hand, right? And then it's getting better at, if one of them drops off, the whole thing doesn't do a spiral.
Yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
Absolutely. And one thing that popped up, this might be random, but like I feel like a lot of people think food freedom is just like constantly like including Oreos and ice cream into your day, but it's really not. And again, like this is more so towards people who did have disordered eating or more of like full-blown eating disorders. Like we think that things are very like either black or white. So when we're like, okay, either I'm clean eating or I'm food freedom based and I'm just eating ice cream all the time, where it's like, no, there is like an like we're diet culture essentially, like, you know, who people are like, oh, clean eating, this is a good food, blah blah blah, and food freedom kind of marry up, where it's like neither is good or bad, but to any extreme both are bad. So like rather than attaching like, oh, diet culture, this is such a bad, you're evil, like no, like eating clean foods does make your body feel good, like we cannot deny that. Okay, great. But also adding in that moderation and adding in some ice cream when you go out with your kids to on a hot summer night stay, whatever, and like having those two things marry up, I think is the most ideal, where neither is good or bad, but both together is ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're more, it's one of those things. It's like you're more than just the food you eat. Although the food you eat does affect how you feel. And it's getting better at living in the space where there's going to be moments where you feel uncomfortable. There's going to be moments where you feel comfortable, right? And being okay with it, and making sure that you're constantly on this journey of growth, and that it's not just you're doing great or you're a failure. That's too
Mhm.
extreme. Let's bring it, if you're watching me on YouTube, it's like let's bring it back to the middle and keep going on the journey, right? Anything
Absolutely.
else you have to say on this topic?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. This was so valuable. You
Yeah.
guys hit subscribe.
Hit subscribe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for being here. We love and appreciate you. Share this episode with a friend. And in the meantime, be free, feel fresh, and live on fire.